Tall Russian strangles a scientist like Darth Vader at the beginning of Star Wars. The double key turning to start up the accelerator beam is straight out of the beginning of War Games. 11 has a book called Using Good English. 11 has posters of a dinosaur and a butterfly on her wall, a Godzilla Mothra in-joke for the movie Millie Bob Brown starred in earlier this year. Hopper is seen watching Magnum P.I., which will be an inspiration for him later this season. Also, there's an episode of Cheers, and the Sam-Diane dynamic will hold true for Hopper and Joyce. In the movie theater, there are posters for Cocoon and Back to the Future, and the kids sneak into a screening of Day of the Dead, which was released in the middle of those movies. The Day of the Dead soundtrack is reminiscent of Stranger Things' opening credits. It also hints of a zombie-like invasion on the way. Jonathan's bedroom has a poster for the original Evil Dead, as well as one for R.E.M's first full album, Murmur. Dustin's gold leader returning to base is a Star Wars reference both to the original movie and to Lando's call sign in Return of the Jedi. There's plenty of Ghostbusters stuff in Dustin's room. Dustin has an R2-D2 toy. Also, he has a monkey holding symbols, which is not only from the cover of Stephen King's Skeleton Crew, but also from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Toys seemingly coming to life is also from Close Encounters and Poltergeist. Other cool toys worth mentioning are the Transformer Ultra Magnus, although he actually came out in 1986, and Deadeye from Star Ears. The music here is from Killer Clowns in Outer Space. Dustin tries to defend himself with Farrah Fawcett hairspray, the same brand that Steve happens to use.
Do 4 puffs of the Farrah Fawcett spray.
Cerebro is, of course, from the X-Men. Radio Shack being closed down not only shows the effect of the mall on small-town businesses, but also reminds us of the loss of Bob. The Save Downtown flyers are a nod to Save the Clock Tower from Back to the Future. Billy's approach to the pool is the same music cue as the famous Phoebe Cates' Fast Times at Ridgemont High pool scene. Dustin also compared his girlfriend Susie to Phoebe Cates, an 80s icon who will get a lot of love this season.
Think Phoebe Cates, only hotter.
Billy calling that poor kid lard ass is a nod to Stand By Me. The exploding rats in the abandoned mill feels like it may be a nod to Stephen King's Graveyard Shift. The blue lighting behind Billy takes its inspiration from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. These face huggers are inspired by Alien. The army of people implied to take human forms of their hosts, including Billy, is inspired by Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Hopper is eating Honey Smacks cereal. Hopper jams out to Jim Croce's You Don't Mess Around with Jim in a happy parental victory moment, which he also danced around to in season 2. Max has an Endless Summer poster in her bedroom. Mike still has the poster for The Thing on his basement wall. Protesting outside Town Hall is similar to the protests about the closing of the beaches in Jaws. Mayor Larry Klein is reminiscent of the mayor from Jaws. The Jaws mayor's name was even named Larry Vaughn. Larry Klein is also wearing a similar blue and white striped shirt to what Larry Vaughn wears. Plus, he's also really into 4th of July celebrations. Scott Clark is jamming to Weird Al's
Spires?
A parody of the Knack's My Sharona. The exploding rats turn into something very much like The Blob remade in 1988. The infection on Billy's arm is much like when people become Deadites in the Evil Dead franchise. Scott Clark has a tabletop recreation of the town in his garage for experiments, just like Doc Brown in Back to the Future, also Beetlejuice. In fact, here's the ghost with the most tombstone. There's nothing more 80s than glamour shots. Hopper's new shirt for his date is inspired by how cool he thinks Magnum P.I. is.
I can do anything I want. I'm the chief of police.
I can do anything I want, I'm the chief of police, is what a drunk Chief Brody says in Jaws.
I can do anything. I'm the chief of police.
Ralph Macchio gets a shout out.
Macchio? Yeah, he's the Karate Kid. Hi-ya!
The shot of Billy's car that 11 sees feels very much like John Carpenter's adaptation of Stephen King's Christine. Billy has a poster of Tank's debut album, Filth Hounds of Hades, on his wall. Deep cut. Max saying "gag me with a spoon" is a classic 80s Valley Girl thing to say.
Gag me with a spoon!
When they're looking for Russians, Dustin says they're looking for someone
Tall, blonde, not smiling.
which feels like a direct Rocky IV reference. This red door is pretty similar to the red door in A Nightmare on Elm Street. The door was blue in the original, then red in the sequels. It might be a stretch, but the house number here is almost too close to be a coincidence. Maybe the Duffer Brothers just misremembered it. Dustin is wearing a Weird Al shirt this episode. Jazzercise was popularized by Olivia Newton-John's music video for Physical in 1981, which this scene is very similar to. Robin discovers that the code refers to deliveries coming in from the Chinese restaurant and Kaufman shoes, which is a nod to director Philip Kaufman, who made Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Castle Byers has stacks of issues of Dragon magazine, which was a staple reading for any serious D&D player. Doris. More Evil Dead. At one point, Max introduces 11 to Wonder Woman, who isn't inherently 80s, but it's a fun coincidence since Wonder Woman has her own movie coming out next year set in 1984. Many references get made to the Patrick Swayze classic Red Dawn. Robin has to correct Steve when he says Dustin can bend like Gumbo. She knows he means Gumby, who became popular again thanks to Eddie Murphy's Saturday Night Live sketch in 1982. Being unable to squeeze through the air vents is a reference to the oversized vents in Die Hard. Larry's got Miami Vice wallpaper. The mysterious containers the Russians have open the same way as power cells on the ship in Alien. They're also very reminiscent of Back to the Future. They also resemble the ooze that brought the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to life. Billy's Mind Flayer transformation has a distinctly American Werewolf in London vibe. The song played at the end is Vera Lynn's We'll Meet Again, which also plays at the end of Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove.
We'll meet again. Don't know where. Don't know where.
The Russian henchman is clearly the Terminator.
I'm gonna blow some daylight into that thick skull of yours.
Feels like a nod to the Living Daylights, which has its own tall, evil Russian henchman.
Because you're a policeman. Policemen have rules.
The Russians' policemen have rules is a direct quote from Die Hard.
Because you're a policeman, there are rules for policemen.
The Russians' lair beneath the mall looks straight out of the Bond movie You Only Live Twice, also Moonraker with its bad guy shuttle bus service. This car looks like the Delta 88 car, the classic from the Evil Dead movies, Sam Raimi's trademark as a director. Todd is wearing a tire that's definitely taken from Crockett on Miami Vice. The cashier punches out the Terminator theme song on his register.
It's gotta be much more valuable, like Promethium or something.
Dustin mentions that the goo found in the containers might be a power source similar to the Promethium used to create the bionic components of Teen Titans and later Justice League and Doom Patrol member Cyborg. Heather's name must be a reference to the film Heather starring Winona Ryder, especially because they find these chemicals on her counter. The first Heather from the movie was killed by drinking chemicals Winona passes off as hangover medicine. This Kit Kat Cash giveaway label is spot on. This contest did indeed run in 1985. Reese's Pieces' popularity was due to E.T. a few years earlier. Red M&Ms, however, were not around in 1985 due to concerns over red dye number 2. They didn't return until 1987. Speaking of junk food, Hopper guzzles legendary Jolt Cola in the convenience store. The Mind Flayer screaming inches from Nancy's face is straight out of Alien 3. Fat Rambo. A worker at the fair is shown wearing a 1982 World's Fair t-shirt. The Gravitron was a very popular carnival ride in the 1980s. Pointer Sisters' Neutron Dance plays as Alexi almost drives away. That's from the Beverly Hills Cop soundtrack. The Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade vibes are strong with Steve and Robin tied back to back on a chair. The creepy torture doctor is named Dr. Zarkov, which could be a reference to Flash Gordon's Dr. Hans Zarkov. The opening sequence of an attack at the cabin is right out of The Evil Dead with nods to Night of the Living Dead as well. The deer head on the wall has an Evil Dead 2 vibe. While the Mind Flayer's mouth-in-mouth could be an Alien reference, it also looks a lot like the Graboid from Tremors. Cutting off a piece of the Mind Flayer, which then crawls around the floor of the cabin in the woods, is also a lot like Ash's hand in Evil Dead 2. Back to the Future is a central part of this episode. On the marquee in the lobby, there is Cocoon, Fletch, Daryl, The Stuff, and Return to Oz. There's also a Pee-wee's Big Adventure poster. You can also spot an Atari sign in the movie theater. Steve refers to Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future as Alex P. Keaton, the role he played in Family Ties.
Dustin? Mike? Dustin! Mike! Oh my god, you have to do it.
There's a cool use of Alan Silvestri's Back to the Future sting when Dustin is dropping some plot revelations to Mike on the radio, but coming from what is being played on the movie screen behind him. Mr. T cereal was popular in the 80s, but it was when Pee-wee Herman ate some in Pee-wee's Big Adventure in 1985 that it really became popular.
I pity the poor fool! Don't eat my cereal!
Other entertainment tie-in cereals appear like Smurf Berry Crunch, Ghostbusters cereal, G.I. Joe Action Star cereal, Rainbow Bright cereal, Pac-Man cereal, and Donkey Kong cereal. Behind Elle, you can see boxes of Ziploc bags featuring Gizmo from Gremlins. When Elle is blindfolded and focusing at the grocery store, she's in front of a freezer with her beloved Eggo waffles. Lucas debates the new Coke versus Classic and compares it to John Carpenter's The Thing versus the original.
Better. You're insane.
Hey, an ad for members only jackets. Time Out, the classic arcade from the 80s, shows up in the background as Steve, Dustin, Robin, and Erica flee the Russians. Removing the parasite in Elle's leg is very Alien. Steve and company are rocking out to Howard Huntsberry's Your Love, which is also a tune used to save the day by the heroes of Ghostbusters 2. Going behind enemy lines while dressed as Russians feels very Stripes. Billy's car charge is also a very Stephen King Christine moment. Murray Bauman crawling under the enemy as Hopper seals him into his vent looks a lot like Lance Hendrickson's Bishop in Aliens. Hopper turns down a date on Friday night with Joyce because that's the night Miami Vice comes on and he says it's Elle's favorite show. Speaking of Hopper and Elle's relationship, Elle wears a blue hair tie on her wrist as a bracelet. This actually once belonged to Hopper's daughter, Sarah.
Griswold family, this is Scoop Troop, you copy, over.
Dustin gives those in the Wheeler station wagon the codename Griswold family because their vehicle looks like the Griswold's car in National Lampoon's Vacation. When Dustin calls his girlfriend Susie to help save the world, in the background of her room we can see Dustin's famous red, white, and blue hat from Season 1 and Season 2, giving meaning to his new choice of headwear. Surely no one missed this. Dustin and his real-life girlfriend duet The Never-Ending Story. What you might have missed was this clever nod to Stephen King's It when Lucas uses a slingshot to pop a balloon while fighting the Mind Flayer. This chase seems familiar. Jurassic Park, anyone? Evil Russian receives similar scars on his face as Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2 while battling Hopper at the end. But the fight between Hopper and this guy also reminds us of Indiana Jones versus the giant Nazi mechanic in Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Russian meets a similar end here too. The newscast at the beginning of the epilogue starts on a clock tower, which is a nod to Back to the Future. The newscast also references the satanic panic of the 80s. Family Video is run by Keith from Season 2, who worked at the arcade, which is right next door. There's Breakfast Club and Firestarter posters at the video store. Akira Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress was a major influence on Star Wars. Oh look, more Phoebe Cates. It's worth noting that the end song is a reprisal of the song Heroes. Heroes was played in Season 1 when everyone thought Will was dead. Is this an illusion backing up that the American mention in the mid-credit scene is in fact Hopper? I guess we're gonna have to wait till Season 4 to find out.